If you follow me on Instagram, then you've already seen this, but Emre Can, the guy who plays for Juve, was spotted wearing some prototype blackout Mercurial Superfly 7s from Nike, aka the next generation Superfly. In this video, I want to break down everything that we can make out from these pictures, which is actually quite a lot. And I'm curious to hear everyone's opinion down below in the comments, but if you're asking for mine, honestly, I kind of think these are a little bit boring. If you guys enjoy the boot spotting videos on the channel and want to see them continue, don't forget to support this one with a like. And if you're new here watching for the first time and don't want to miss out on future content from me, including a review of the Superfly 7 when it eventually comes out, don't forget to hit that subscribe button along with the little bell notification so you get notified when the next new video goes live. I should have a Superfly on the desk while I'm talking about this. Perfect. So first things first, it does look like we are in fact going to get a next generation Superfly, likely to be called the Superfly 7 Elite, which we were unsure about last week when we saw pros like Hazard training in what looked to be the next generation Mercurial Vapor 13. I did another video talking about everything there is to know about those boots, so if you want to check that out, I'll leave a pop-up on screen. Either way, the boots that you can see in these pictures are clearly a mid-cut variation of a blacked out Mercurial, which more than likely is a Superfly. Focusing specifically on the collar, based on these pictures, it looks to be exactly the same as what we currently have on the Superfly 6, where it's still a mid-cut boot for sure, but the collar is cut a little bit lower than what we originally had on the Superfly 4 and 5, and it has that little extension piece at the front as well, which reminds me a lot of the little fold-over flap tongue we used to have on the Vapor 1, 2, and 3. So I like that element from a visual perspective. There's nothing wrong with the collar that we're seeing here on these prototypes, but the fact that it's exactly the same I think is a little bit disappointing. Ultimately, the collar doesn't really do anything, but I think some minor variation in the design, even just a pattern that they've added on, which is possibly going to happen. These are fully blacked out, so we don't really get a clear depiction of exactly how the Flyknit construction is, but the fact that it does look so similar leads me to believe that it will in fact be pretty much the same. Moving on to the sole plate and stud pattern, we can see much more clearly in these pictures versus the ones that we saw of the Vapor exactly what's going on, and based on these pictures it looks like a direct carryover to what we currently have, a split sole design with a stud plate in the heel and the forefoot. The stud pattern, in my opinion, looks to be pretty much identical, which isn't too surprising, but again is slightly disappointing, and it's still got the split sole construction with the Flyknit running through the midfoot area, covering the bottom of what is an internal plastic sole plate. So it doesn't look like we're getting any changes with the bottom of the boot. As for the upper, the first thing to note is that this is very clearly still made out of Flyknit, which is not really surprising to anybody. And we get our first good look at the medial side of the upper, which we haven't really seen based on those early pictures of the Vapor 13 prototypes. However, the texturing does seem to be maintained on the medial side as it is on the lateral side, where you'll notice that it has these kind of streaking lines that run the length of the boot. You kind of have a similar design like that on the current Superfly 6, but it's a lot less significant than what we're seeing here on this next generation Superfly 7, and actually something that is reminiscent of the very popular limited edition release that was the Flyknit Ultra. Obviously the lines are going in the opposite direction, but based on the significance of this texturing and I guess how far off the boot that these lines are kind of raised, I am optimistic that we're going to get some added grip element like we had on the Flyknit Ultra on this next generation Superfly and likely the Vapor as well. Something else that I noticed that I thought was maybe a little bit strange were the 3 stitches that you have on the medial side of the heel, very reminiscent of the stitching that we saw on Coutinho's custom variation of the Mercurial Vapor 11s and the Vapor 12s that he's worn. So I'm wondering if maybe this is just a customization for this player specifically, or if this is something that's going to make its way onto the next generation Superfly and possibly even the next generation Vapor. And what that's really doing, I would think it has to do with structure. It could potentially have something to do with the heel liner as well. And there's definitely potential for them to maybe add a little bit more padding or do something interesting with the liner, which we've seen plenty of times in the past with the Mercurial series. most of the time leading to a lot of blisters rather than better comfort, but I'm curious to see if that's going to turn into anything when we finally get the next generation Superfly. Which brings us to the reason as to why I think these are maybe a little bit boring and why I'm slightly disappointed. We got an early look at the Mercurial Vapor 13 and it was exciting and unsurprisingly very similar to the Vapor 12, but with the hopes of having that added texturing from the Flyknit Ultra, which I really do hope that they do. Now that we have a look at the next generation Superfly that I think we can confirm is happening, it appears to be exactly the same boot, but with a mid-cut collar. Now from a performance perspective, there's absolutely nothing wrong with doing this. Based on these pictures, we can assume that the next generation of Mercurial, both Vapor and Superfly, is going to be more so a minor evolution rather than a complete revolution where they're changing everything and essentially redesigning the Mercurial again. So not too surprising from that perspective, but I guess what I'm disappointed in is the fact that once again, we're going to be offered a Vapor and a Superfly with the option to pay an extra $25 for the Superfly variant that simply adds a collar. It's not going to improve performance. There's technically nothing better or worse about the boots. It's just whether or not you want the collar, which is fine. But for me, what's always been exciting about the Superfly is the extra features that it has on offer over the Vapor. It was always cool to have two different variants of a top-end Mercurial model, where you can have that super lightweight, I guess more traditional experience from the Vapor, and then something wild and crazy and never seen before in the form of the Superfly. That's been taken away from us with this current generation Mercurial, and it doesn't look like we're getting that back with the next generation either. And I guess it's also worth noting that it does look like Nike's trying to break out of their normal 2-year life cycle for a line of football boots, meaning that if this boot comes out today, we're not going to expect a next generation model for basically 2 years. And the current generation of Mercurials has been out for a little over a year now. I'm expecting, based on how finished these blacked out prototypes look, they look like they're almost complete. We're probably going to see a release likely sometime this summer. Within the next 2 or 3 months, I would say, is probably going to happen. At least that would be my best guess. I said this in a recent Q&A video, and I'm curious to get your opinions on this down below in the comments, but I think it would be better for Nike to actually kill the Superfly for 1 generation of Mercurial, maybe even 2, and then bring it back when they truly have something special, because that to me is really what established the Superfly name. Let's keep in mind that we went all the way up to Mercurial Vapor 5 before we got any kind of Superfly, and the Mercurial was going very strong up until that point. But when we got the Superfly with the carbon fiber sole plate and the introduction of Flywire and the hollowed out studs and all this interesting tech that got introduced on every new generation of Superfly, granted Superfly 2 and 3 were almost the exact same thing, that's besides the point. Every Superfly was memorable because of something special that it introduced that we had never seen before. And what they're doing right now with the Superfly 6 and Vapor 12 and what looks to be the Vapor 13 and the Superfly 7, they're kind of just variations of the same thing. Yes, the Vapor is good. Yes, the Superfly is good, but there's nothing really that interesting about the Superfly as we've seen in the past. Nike, if you're watching, here's a totally free idea. Go ahead and use it if you want. But instead of the Superfly 7, let's wait a year and then come back with the Super Duper Fly 7. Should probably end the video after that. Anyways, guys, that's it for what is an early look at the next generation Superfly 7 that I think is coming sooner rather than later. If you guys enjoyed this video, please support it with a like. And if you have any questions regarding anything that I discussed in this video or any opinions or observations of your own, leave all of that down below in the comments and I'll answer anything you guys have to ask. If you aren't subscribed already, be sure to hit that subscribe button for daily videos on all the latest and greatest soccer gear. You can find all my social media information linked down below in the description as well. And other than that, guys, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.